Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video of my creative life with Kel Sweetie, where we craft, we make art, we read books, and we love the holidays. Today we are making some more Halloween crafts. October is nearly over, but I bought all of this before October even started, and now I have time to do it. So today we are going to be making some clay crafts. Earlier in the month, I tried to do a clay doll. Didn't do so well. It didn't go well. I'm also doing another craft today that will be a cloche scene. These have kind of been all over the place this year. Martha Stewart has been making a lot of them with haunted houses and ghosts inside of them, and I think that they were really cute. But I also was like, I could make my own of those. So I'm going to show you two ways to do that today. One that is a much easier way to go about it if you are not crafty, but still want your own personalized cloche. And another way, the harder way, to go about this if you are a bit more crafty and want to create a very specific type of cloche. These are going to be miniatures. I'm going to see if that maybe helps at all for what I'm going to try and make today. As we know, the vintage doll just did not work out earlier this month. I don't know if it's gonna work out now, to be honest. That's a lot of work and sewing currently in my mind, but we will see. We will also see, because when I was making the head for that craft, it also did not go as planned. My anatomy was all off. We will see. I do know that I've been wanting to do this cloche. I was trying to get some other things to kind of put in it, and y'all have sold out the Halloween in all the stores. Target is like, we have nothing left. We are now putting out Christmas. Considering all of that, it just means that I'll have to make a couple of more things. It should be fun. I have been putting it out because I've had so much more things to do. So let's get into that. I'm excited to see how it turns out. Hello from VoiceOver Kelsey. So for the cloche project, you'll need some aluminum wire, super glue, cloche, clay tools, Sculpey clay, preferably the super Sculpey and transparent, craft turf, glue gun, paintbrush, acrylic paint, and some Limax minis. Those are optional. Speaking of which, I used the Limax fall trees for the main tree in this cloche. I think I bought this one when it was 40% off at Michael's, or when I used a coupon or something along those lines. They're pretty expensive in my opinion when not using that, but they look great in this circumstance. I don't think that they're really for me in my Halloween usage, but on my village, but it was great in this circumstance. You're also going to get some of that craft turf that they sell during Halloween in Michael's. Right here, I was just figuring out the positioning for what part of the turf I wanted to use, since it has a lot of texture in it. I just used a paint pen to circle around the cloche to get my measurements together. That worked great for me later on, because you don't want to cut your turf to how the bottom of the cloche is, because that's going to cause it to be too big for the cloche to fit around. Just a heads up. I'm using that super glue to glue the turf down. You could use hot glue, any other glue will work and everything. I just had super glue and it's fast acting, and that's great for me. So if you see right there, I was pointing to the fact that there's a lot of texture in the surface, and there's a lot of cracks and everything. That's what I was saying earlier about picking your spot in the turf that you liked. So I used some hot glue to put some craft moss in those cracks, and to also kind of create more texture and color and everything for the ground that we're creating this cloche. Now keep in mind, craft moss is real moss. I was not aware of that. I guess I wasn't thinking that was the case. So you are going to have a little bit of moisture underneath your cloche if you use this moss, And that's not that big of an issue unless you use a paint that isn't good for moisture. I say that because later on I'll talk about how my creature's dress kind of is starting to get a little ashy looking. I think it's because of the moisture in the moss kind of reacting with the gouache that I used, which don't use gouache either. Just a little heads up as you see me fluffing out my little tree, and I put some of that moss on top of the tree in order to just make it look like it was coming out of the ground essentially. I also had it offset, so I had to figure out how to fit the cloche on top of that. Here are some minis that I got from the Target dollar spot as well as the Limax section this year. The pumpkins and the gravestones I'll be using in my final product, but I got these skeletons from my Halloween village just to show you that if you aren't one for sculpting and you're more of a hot gluer, that is fine. You can still participate in this craft. You will just need to get some of those Limax figures, and you know, they always go on sale basically as soon as they even put them out, and use those for your cloche. I actually think that's why Michaels sells the cloche in the first place, is for you to do that way. I think it looked great. In the final portion of this part of the craft, I don't end up gluing them down, of course, because I craft my own figure, and so it may not look the best, but you get the idea. There are many ways to go about this, and I've never seen somebody actually go through how to make these cloches that come every year at Michael's. I've never seen anyone actually like do a craft with them. I see them every year, so I know people are doing it. So you'll see in just a moment how this all turned out, but I think that the little setting is so cute, and it would be so great to have these little dancing skeletons amongst your tombstone scene. That would be the end of the craft. That'd be great. So moving on to actually making your figure, I'm going to put a little picture here of the armature that I did not get any filming of that I built because I was figuring out how to even make an armature and everything. If you see here, this is the armature. You're basically going to make a Blair Witch Project type of thing, a stick figure, and then you're going to use foil to build out your armature because you don't want to use anything thicker than 1/4 to 1/2 an inch of clay because it's going to mess up your baking and all of that. If you want to make a Victorian creature woman like I end up doing, then you're going to want to make that entire skirt just foil, and I'll show that in a minute. Right now I have legs because I thought that I wanted legs, and then I decided no, I don't want that. So now you see what I had here. All of that underneath that bell is foil. It's nothing but foil. You'll also see it's going to look ugly before it looks anything good. So, you know, just keep moving it around. It will start to look like something eventually. You just want to piece off pieces of clay and just work towards something that looks like a thing at some point. This was after like 2.5 hours of me working with it. So make sure you've got a YouTube video to put on. You know, this isn't something you do in 2 seconds. I also decided last minute to make this little hand because of an idea I had. You'll see where that comes in later. So I have baked my sculpty clay. You want to bake it at 275 for about 15 minutes. I did 15 minutes and that ended up being fine. I think on the package it says you can bake a little bit over if your clay is thicker. 15 minutes ended up being just fine for both of my projects that ended up being in this video today. I made the mistake, like I said before, do not use gouache. Do not use a latex paint that has plastic in it. I don't think the Craft Smart paints that they sell at Michael's have plastic in them, so they turned out fine, but the dress would have been better if it wasn't so shiny. If you see here, it kind of looks latexy, but this was the final result. I absolutely loved how it turned out. I'm gonna have this on my bookcase all year, but it just looks so cute. Look at that little hand. It's so cute. I'm gonna tell you the story about it later. So for the doll project, you're going to need that same wire, that aluminum wire, thread and a needle, scissors, felt, clay tools, sculpty clay, transparent just like the other one, polyfill, glue gun, a paintbrush, acrylic paint, and wire cutters. Essentially, a lot of what you just used. Here, I did get some footage of me building my base for my head. What I just did with the aluminum foil, putting it in a ball, it's the same thing you're basically going to do when you build your figure as well. You're never going to see it. It's really just filler and everything. Right now, I'm going to be using this as the base for my head, so I just create, a ball in around the size that I want my figure's head to be, and then I put some of that sculpty clay on top of it to create a ball. I am showing you the measurements in order to build this head. Now, I am also going to put the creator that I studied in order to figure out how to do these measurements and do this head, because they did such an amazing job. I could never even try to top explaining or showing you how to make this head, because really they don't even talk. They just show you, and it was so, that's the only way that I can make the head that you're looking at, right, that you're going to end up looking at. These are all I did, however, show you every single measurement that I made, and essentially, just so that you have an idea of what to expect in that video. If you've never built a head, out of Sculpey, you're going to be making the planes of the face and carving against those planes. So instead of building out something, you're going to be carving away a good majority of things until you start building back in features. I think that it was crazy to me from looking at the video how the head just started to kind of become alive. After all of these cuts I was making and everything, it really just kind of turned out perfectly that way. That's why I really want to show that you guys what creator I looked at, because they really just did such an amazing job. I now feel like I want to make a doll like this for Christmas or for some other holiday or just crafting period, because this really made it just so much easier looking at that video. It really was great. The other great part about carving away the head is that all that leftover you see kind of sitting on my little cardboard workspace there, yeah, I'm going to use that later to build back in features like the nose and the eyes and the lips and the ears and everything. You really don't have to go back into your Sculpey package again, because you have all of your ready Sculpey sitting right there, which is great, because if you've never worked with Sculpey before, you have to knead it quite a bit before it becomes malleable. So as you're kind of watching me build out this face and everything, I want to talk about why you're using the transparent Super Sculpey instead of like the gray Sculpey you see a lot of people who make dolls and stuff use. One, because I've learned this, so I'm passing that knowledge along. That is the firm Sculpey, and while it does reduce these fingerprints and lumps that you see on my head here, it also is very hard to work with. You have to knead it a lot before it becomes really malleable, and even then, you kind of have to keep on working at it. It's not as forgiving as a Super Sculpey is. You don't want to get the regular white Sculpey because that's not as good as a clay to work with. And getting this transparent Sculpey, you'll see later on when I paint the face, it works as a great undertone base for some reason. I think that it's not this pale pink necessarily, although the color does take color very well, because basically now you already have a pretty white base to work off of. But it's something about how you can it's transparent that's really great. I want to work more with it in the future for maybe making something that glows. Crazy idea. Maybe look out for it in the future for Christmas. That's when things glow, I guess. So that's some of the reason as to why this specific Sculpey is the best to use, in my opinion. Once you knead it and everything, it's really easy to work with. And again, like I said before, it's gonna look ugly before it looks like anything at all. A lot of it is just breaking down planes, and really it's just taking small pieces and adding them bit by bit and smoothing it into the skin that you're making here and everything. But I mean, he's lumpy, he's ugly, but he's a Frankenstein. So I was going to make Wolfman, and looking back, I would have been so upset if I would have tried to do a Wolfman doll. For my first one, the hair would have been horrible, but because we're making Frankenstein and he's a lumpy dude, it's okay that it was a little bit lumpy. I think this is a perfect start if you're trying to make universal monsters. So here you'll kind of see underneath that pink, I'm not putting a ton of product on my brush. I'm not necessarily dry brushing, but I'm doing just enough where you're kind of seeing that transparency shine through, and it makes it even more look like skin, in my opinion. If you look at one of my crafting videos from the very beginning of the season, I used that same thought process of painting my Frankenstein bust that I used for my displays this year here for this Frankenstein as well. I used a base of this green apple Craft Smart paint, and then I used a lavender color to build in those purples, and then a yellow color to build in the highlights. That's why his face isn't flat. It's full of color, it's high saturation and everything. It's kind of how I don't like to really use white or black to darken much, just because you don't want your colors to fall flat and everything. Here I'm making the armature, and this will kind of be a better look at what I should have showed for my figure before. So it's different but the same. Here I'm strengthening the armature. That's if you see me twisting it on itself. Really, this stuff is really forgiving. I am not strong, so I believe that anybody could twist this. Some pliers would make it easier, but it's not necessary. You don't need a drill. I've seen people use drills, and I'm just like, that's overkill. You can use your hands. Reason why you do this is because you want to give some strength and support to your doll. You don't want him flopping around, and if you just only use one bit of, like, one strand of that wire, he won't have a lot to him. I learned this with my Coraline doll. I didn't strengthen it, and there's no strength. Now, keep in mind, I made that like 3 years ago, but they just flop around all over the place. You see this is Blair Witch Project. It's given Blair Witch Project. I cut off the top there so that I can have a straight location to put that inside of the doll's head. This is another thing. When you're making the doll in the neck, make sure that you make a little hole there that's big enough for your wire that your armature is going to go inside of before you bake it. You can do it after, but I think that it's going to be easiest before because you'll already have that hole there, and you may have to open it up just a little bit with maybe a little clay drill that will probably be in your Craft Smart kit if you buy one from Michael's. I know that mine was just cheap and it already came in there, and I used that to kind of open it up. Here I'm making the body for my Frankenstein, and yes, I know there are way cleaner ways to make a body. I could have broken this up into different appendages and then filled those and sewn those, and it would have given more of a ragdoll look. And looking back, if I wanted a cleaner doll, I definitely could have done that. Maybe I'll do that in the future. What I do like about this that's really rough and ready is it kind of ends up looking like a voodoo doll type of thing, which is on brand. We are making a Halloween doll. So I'm actually really happy with how in the end it kind of looks like off-putting, a little creepy, like a little, it's really looking handmade. And I think, if anything, that feeds into the whole Frankenstein and the whole spooky Halloween doll thing. If you want something cleaner, there are plenty of ways to make a cleaner looking doll, and I even know them. So I know, it looks very crafty. Here after sewing it, I'm just turning it inside out so that those, my sewing is cleaner and everything. For the little hands and everything, it may get a little hard if you just use your fingers. So just get in there with a pin, just to put in all of your crease where they need to go. Looking back, I might have even using a ballpoint pen, and instead of just that back, that could have even worked better. Or some chopsticks, some dull scissors. I mean, really anything will work. When you sew your doll, though, make sure that you don't sew all the way up to the neck, that you sew all the way to like the top of the shoulders. Why? Because of what I'm doing right here. You got to fit your armature in there, and you're gonna have a hell of a time doing that if you're just putting it through that neck hole. Also, later on I'm going to tell you about how I messed up on the neck hole, but we won't talk about it just yet. Here I'm putting in this polyurethane fill and everything. You can get this in any fabric crafting section of your Michaels store. I need to be sponsored by Michaels. This is a Michaels sponsored video at this point. I got this on sale. I think I paid $4 for this bag, and it's a humongous bag. If you're making a doll of this size, you're gonna have tons of polyfill for a while. Okay, here's a mistake. You see around those ends there? I did not measure my neck hole, and so now the sides don't have any fabric around them. How did I fix that? I made it a collar. I made my Frankie a collar, and now it's like, oh, no, that was on purpose. But now that I made it a collar, I'm like, okay, well, that's the shirt for sure. So I'm gonna make some pants to go on top of that. I messed up again. I had to sew these pants onto my Frankenstein instead of putting him inside of them because of how kind of tight I measured them. It's fine. It turned out so cute. He's so rough and ready and cute and ugly all at the same time. He's gonna be sitting on my bookshelf just like that next to my Frankenstein special edition book all year. And that's it. I'm happy with how they turned out. He's a little ugly, but he's my little ugly Frankenstein doll. Honestly, this was my first time ever working with Sculpey or making something like this. I think the closest thing I've gotten to something like this was a Coraline doll I made at the beginning of the pandemic, like in 2020. This is very different from that. I kind of just had to put a little nose and some buttons on that as opposed to like trying to make an actual head. I mean, I love him. He's ugly and like a little like scary and off-putting, but maybe that makes him even better. He's the perfect little size to just plop on your like little bookcase, which I will be doing. He will be going next to my horror things on my bookcase. So I will say, do not use super glue on, especially like putting the head on and everything. I had to find out the hard way, but I completely forgot. Super glue is combustible when put with polyfill. When it started smoking and heating up, I realized I messed up. So don't be like me. Don't do that. Use hot glue. It'll work just fine and everything. But yeah, I think he's such adorable. And my little terrarium, I love it. Oh my god, I'm so happy that I did the little hand and everything. I was like thinking whether or not to do that. I ended up doing it, and I think it's such a great little piece. I even think my little woman creature is great. She kind of looks like she's in mourning of her love, and he's like coming in. I've created this whole romantic dialogue with it. She's a Victorian in mourning, and her like love, she was visiting her love, and he is now coming out of the ground. That's what I've come up with in this little terrarium. I'm also gonna probably have this out and with my horror things all year because I just love how it turned out. Now the moss, I think, has some sort of like water or moisture in it because the bottom of her skirt is kind of starting to look like it's absorbing some kind of moisture. I don't know what that is. I'm not necessarily off-putted by it because it being a Halloween thing, but keep that in mind that if you use, I think it's this moss, because this is plastic, this kind that you get from Michaels, it kind of comes in like a flat little thing that doesn't have any water in it, but I think the moss, the other moss that I have that's kind of put in between there has some moisture, so I think that's what's happening there. But I love it. I love how it turned out. I think this is so much better than getting one of those $20 ones from the Martha Stewart collection at Home Goods. So I highly recommend you do it if you feel like you have the time and the patience, because the patience was a big thing on this. But I think both of them turned out so great. I had so much fun making these crafts. I'm glad that I finally got to do them before the month was up. I'm just happy I got to them. And I had a good time. I mean, it definitely is an all-day thing. And it's a 2-day project. For me, personally, I think that you can maybe get it done in 1 day. I just started crafting and like sculpting late the night before. So, but I think that it's something you could get done if you're like, okay, all day, have nothing to do whatsoever, starting early in the morning and keep on going until I finish like sometime around 8, you know? The doll especially took a good amount of time just because of the sewing and the filling and the painting, and that took a lot of time, but I do think it's something doable within a day. Not like my other crafting video where I had to do gravestones throughout a week because of just how involved it was. So yeah, I hope that like this was enjoyable and you learned something new today. Even if like, you know, you're watching this as I'm posting this now and you can't like look at it for Halloween, these are still great to try and use for any of your Christmas decorations and everything like that. So I had fun. Please subscribe down below if you loved what you watched today. We'll be doing more Christmas decorations coming up soon, but we are finishing out the Halloween season strong, and stick around. Thanks. Bye.